Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Henry Ziemer, and I'm an Associate Fellow with the Americas Program at CSIS. Thank you so much for joining us for this panel. I'm really excited to talk about North American agricultural competitiveness in an era of great power competition. Before we begin, let's just do a couple of reminders on logistics. This panel is going to last approximately 60 minutes. Following the panelists' remarks and a moderated discussion, we'll field questions from the audience. And if you're joining us in person, please remember to submit questions via the QR code that's going to get pulled up once we kick off the discussion. And then if you're joining us online, please go to the event page and click the Ask Live Questions button. Also, note that this discussion will be recorded and a live stream will be available after the conclusion of the event. Global tensions are on the rise in ways that affect every corner of trade, international business, and commerce. Here at CSIS, we're watching these developments every single day. But I think it's safe to say that in the past week, the reality has come home in a much bigger sense than we could have possibly anticipated. As the United States and China engage in a tit-for-tat retaliation escalation, imposing higher and higher tariffs on each other's goods, I'm reminded of how quickly geopolitical tensions can upend business as usual. I'm also reminded that in these uncertain times, how important it is to look beyond statements and bluster to focus on the day-to-day relations between countries that make up our international trade. Fortunately, in North America, I think that the quotidian relations between the United States, Mexico, and Canada remain quite strong. I'm especially impressed in the agricultural sector at how much alignment there is across the industries of our three countries as we confront the challenges of great power competition and how we move forward. In today's panel, I'm hoping to dig into some of the ways that industry is thinking in the short and long term about what the rise in great power competition means, the opportunities, challenges, and likely balancing acts that we're all going to need to perform so that the three of our countries emerge stronger, safer, and of course more competitive. So to help us unpack these trends, I'm really honored to have an absolutely star-studded panel representing all three of the North American countries, the United States, Mexico, and Canada, with me today. Our first speaker is Erin Gawryluk, president of the Canada Grains Council. Her career spans over a decade with experience in government, the private sector, and the nonprofit sector, beginning as a policy research assistant with the Government of Alberta's Agriculture and Rural Development team. She's also worked for Syngenta Canada as manager for government and industry relations, followed by a 4-year term rebuilding and leading the Grain Growers of Canada as the executive director. Our next speaker is Molly O'Connor, director of federal government relations for CropLife America. Prior to this role, she served as senior policy advisor at Olson Frank Weta Law, where she covered international trade issues for a variety of agriculture policy clients, including serving as the international trade staff for the National Association of Wheat Growers and assisting international clients with tariff and free trade agreement issues. And our final speaker, joining us virtually today, is Jorge Esteve. He is the president of Mexico's National Agricultural Council. In this role, he helps oversee global supply chain issues, international trade policy, and questions of North American agricultural trade integration. Formerly, Mr. Esteve was part of the executive committee of HSBC for Latin America and the Caribbean, and served as CEO of insurance, pensions, and investments in the region, and founded the corporate sustainability department for the bank in Mexico. Erin, over to you for your opening remarks.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to be here with you today in Washington, D.C. at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. It's so important that we have forums like CSIS, which enable this ongoing dialogue with a variety of stakeholders on issues of importance to key sectors across North America, like the agriculture industry. And I'm really honored to be joined by my colleagues from Mexico and from the US, Jorge and Molly, respectively. I cherish these opportunities for trinational dialogue, especially in light of some of the challenges that our sector is facing. You know, I have the privilege of leading a pretty unique association which represents the entire grain value chain in all of Canada. As part of our membership, we have farmers, grain companies, plant innovators, life science companies. Molly and I share some of the same members. And our organization is founded on the principle that when we work together, we can do great things. And I'd like to start by pointing to a few of the examples of how the North American agriculture industry in particular has worked in partnership to accomplish some shared goals. So we have and continue to work through multinational forums such as the International Agri-Food Network and the International Grain Trade Coalition, of which I am the Vice President, to push back against the European Union innovation policies that are restrictive or trade disruptive. Joint positions have been advanced in multilateral settings, including Codex, the WTO, and the FAO, often emphasizing the importance of innovation in addressing key issues like food security, sustainability, and trade facilitation. And here at home, the North American Trilateral Technical Working Group on Pesticides, which operates under the existing free trade agreement, the USMCA, and is an important forum to promote regulatory alignment and cooperation on crop protection technology between Canada, the US, and Mexico. The group ensures that farmers in all three countries have equal access to new and innovative crop protection technology through the promotion of synchronized approval processes across the regulatory jurisdictions. It can also help facilitate agri-food trade across our borders by creating a forum for regulators to work in lockstep to ensure that new pesticide regulatory measures avoid unintended non-tariff trade barriers. Now, we know that the net benefits of trade are optimized when countries adhere to the rules outlined in shared agreements. Increased economic growth, lower prices for consumers, and wider access to businesses lead to a more innovative and competitive global economy. Canada and the US enjoy one of the largest agricultural bilateral trading relationships in the world. In 2023, the value of agriculture trade between the two countries was $73 billion. And in the last 15 years, I love this stat, in the last 15 years, US agriculture exports to Canada have increased by 71%. And Canada is the #1 agriculture export market for 27 US states. The USMCA, which President Trump has cited as a historic win for American farmers, workers, manufacturers, and businesses, has only strengthened trade between Canada, the US, and Mexico, and delivered positive benefits for all three countries. The shared benefits of the USMCA, coupled with the highly integrated supply chain that has developed over the years in support of this trade, suggests, in my view, that America first is North America first. Our economic success is not mutually exclusive, but it is highly interdependent. So beyond our borders, China continues to be an important market for both American and Canadian exports. According to the United States Department of Agriculture, U.S. agriculture exports to China in 2022 were valued at $36.4 billion, making China the largest export market for U.S. agriculture. In the same year, Canada exported just over $7 billion in agri-food products to China. It's our second largest market, and the potential in this market continues to grow. Trade is vitally important to Canadian farmers and businesses that support them. Now, depending on the commodity in Canada, you'll see about 50 to 80% of grains, pulses, and oil seeds that we grow are destined for international markets. Our farmers' livelihoods depend on trade, and so too do the livelihoods of farmers in the US and Mexico. And I'll close by saying that we're facing unprecedented levels of geopolitical uncertainty and instability. Market diversification and de-risking trade will be priorities for Canada going forward. While we cannot afford to lose markets like the US and China, we also cannot afford to have all of our exports so highly concentrated in only a handful of markets. The ag industries in Canada, the US, and Mexico must find ways to work as partners through the aforementioned forums and to promote the benefits of trade, because that is to our benefit. Because we know that there is only one winner in a trade war: our competitors. Our competitors will seize the opportunity to increase their market share and make it very difficult for us to regain that market share. So thank you very much for the opportunity to join you on this stage. I look forward to today's discussion.
Thank you so much, Erin. Molly, over to you.
All right, that was great, Erin. And definitely agree on many of those points, especially the importance of the three countries working together internationally in many of the forums and with USMCA. So I do appreciate those comments. And thank you for inviting me to be here today. This is certainly a timely topic, and I don't think any of us, when we agreed to be on this panel, thought this week would turn out quite the way it did when talking about U.S. and China and agriculture, but it is a very important and timely topic right now. And so I, as was pointed out earlier, work at CropLife America. I'm just going to take some time to give you more background as to who we are and our membership. I think Erin did such a great job presenting kind of that connection point that the three countries have in agriculture. But for us, our members are the manufacturers, formulators, and distributors of pesticides in the United States. And pesticides is an umbrella term, so that's herbicides, insecticides, it encompasses everything. We have members who import ingredients from all over the world. While we manufacture final products here in the United States, we certainly don't have every ingredient that we need available or available at the quantities in the United States. So we do have a lot of manufacturing happening, but not everything we need is here. And so what this allows is it provides products to our growers here in the United States, and I'll say Canada and Mexico have their own version of our trade association for their pesticide manufacturers as well. But here in the United States, it allows for our farmers to have these products available that help them protect their crops from threats of weeds, diseases, and pests. And that's part of the formula of innovation that our farmers have in order to remain competitive globally. And it's an important tool, one of the tools that they have in their toolbox to be able to remain competitive. And so we are constantly looking to make sure that our tools can be readily available for them and upholding the EPA regulatory approach, which is a risk-based approach that our three countries really work closely together in supporting globally as well at forums like the WTO and the Codex. So I think that relationship of our three countries and the strength of the farmer groups in there is really important. But tariffs do, unfortunately, they put a cost, they impact our members. And so what we see when tariffs come into place is how that impacts the supply chain and what it can mean for a farmer's bottom line at the end of the day. And so the tariffs imposed on China, which is a very bright topic today, and even other regions of the world. China is one country that we get ingredients from, but we certainly get ingredients from other parts of the world as well. But again, they're just simply, those ingredients aren't necessarily available here. And we did see some helpful exceptions for our agrochemicals in the latest rounds of tariffs on the reciprocal through the Annex 2. And we find those to be very helpful for our productions of pesticide innovation so that our members can continue to provide these valuable tools and can continue to put money and invest in things like research and development, and to keep facilities open here in the United States to continue to manufacture these end products. So with that said, when we think about supply chains as well for our industry, we are highly regulated, as we should be. These are products that need to be highly regulated, but in order to change a facility, it takes multiple years. I think 3 years is the minimum that we would see the need to change a new facility. Even if it's coming, whether that's coming to the United States or just shifting, let's say you're moving a facility outside of China into another country. The EPA staff has to physically approve the facility. There's a lot of regulations that go along with it. So we can't just make these changes overnight. And so when tariffs come into place that are immediate, there's an immediate impact to our members, and we know that there's not going to be a change that will happen until many years down the road. And so just noting those complexities that come with our industry that maybe some other industries might not have that pressure when changing a supply chain. So we do have, taking away the tariff conversation in China, there are some concerns we do also have about overcapacity and subsidies in China, and how that impacts the American market here and can flood the market with lower prices coming out of China. So, we look at kind of WTO disciplines on subsidies, how can those be addressed in those situations, and be more effective as well. But regardless, the pesticide industry, like others, do have investments in China and producing these commodities at scale. And so there's a vulnerability here for our industry. But if we stop importing pesticides and ingredients from China, what we'll see is our competitors in other regions will most likely continue to still source from there. So if we think about American farmers being competitive against other regions of the world or North America at large, it really puts the U.S. farmer at an economic disadvantage if we struggle to change a supply chain or just cut off from a supply chain with no alternative. So we need to have this reliable, cost-effective supply chain in the United States, but North America at large, which is a lot easier said than done, and we know that. So everything kind of being what it is right now, we're looking at what kind of regulatory barriers and other things that makes these challenging, but also what opportunities we have in this space to address some of these challenges that we have. And just thinking about the North America, the strength of North America and the USMCA, not just with agriculture, but also manufacturing and that supply chain that we're building here. How can we utilize that to bring some of this manufacturing back, or to create the supply chain within North America under USMCA to make it maybe less reliant. So thank you for those comments as I kind of go more into the supply chain side of the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for adding, I think, much needed depth on the timelines and components that are needed for an integrated North American agriculture supply chain. Jorge, over to you for your opening remarks. Seems we're still having some issues with the audio.
No, that was my fault. Thank you, Henry. I'm very happy to be in this panel with Molly and Aaron. I also want to thank CSIS for the opportunity to transmit our ideas. Now, let me start, if you don't mind, by explaining briefly what the Consejo Nacional Agropecuario is, which is basically the umbrella organism of all the agricultural, agro-industrial associations in Mexico. We represent basically more than 80% of the GDP of the agricultural sector and almost 100% of the exports to the world. Having said this, we basically have more than 2 million producers in Mexico, including small and medium farmers that have many challenges in Mexico. As you guys know, water is a big concern, a big challenge for us. Mexico is getting drier, just so you get an idea. In some of our infrastructure, basically, some of our infrastructure capacity in our dams, especially in the north of Mexico, are at 8% capacity before growing season. So this is a major drought, and we will have to reorganize ourselves accordingly. Everybody likes to say that 75% of the water is used for farming, and I think it is correct. But I think it would be more precise to say that 75% of the water is used to produce the food for the world in general. No, I think that as North America, I think we are lucky to be the most auto and self-sufficient region in the world. We are the only region that can claim that our food comes from North America. And this is a privilege, but it's also a responsibility that we must really take care of. And when we are starting to have tariff wars, this puts this region, this rich, self-sufficient region at risk. And that is very dangerous, because it can have consequence of a lifetime, especially so when we have climate change. Climate change is creating a havoc. It is making agriculture more risky for the farmers, but also making it more risky that we have a catastrophic failure. If this continues, I think that in my lifetime, we may see in a region in the world a catastrophic failure of a crop that will generate significant problems for a lot of populations in being able to feed at good prices their populations. So that is very important. So I want to reiterate the responsibility that we have as a region of maintaining this, of working together. We are complementary. Mexico produces basically 50% of the fruits that are consumed in North America and 70% of the vegetables. So you get an idea, 90% of the avocados obviously makes sense, but also 90% of the tomatoes that the United States consumes come from Mexico. No, and the other way around, talking about being complementary, more or less 50%, half of the grains that the U.S. exports come to Mexico. So this speaks about being complementary. Just a word on tariffs. When you talk about these huge tariffs, even 10% tariffs, which have been on the low end of the discussion, it makes any and all agricultural products uncompetitive. The farmers do not have the advantage of having those big margins. So if you were to put those tariffs, it would immediately make the farmers in our countries uncompetitive. Not only do the small agriculture farmers take the biggest risks, because I like to say they have a factory with no roof. So they are really exposed to all the elements. And that is something that we must all be conscious of, the amount of risk taken by the smallholders. In the United States and a little bit in Canada, farmers have the benefits of financial support that is usually in the form of cheaper financing. It's also in the form of competitive insurance and even potential price fixes that help reduce and alleviate a little bit the pain and the risks of this. But having said this, and again, I reiterate, we cannot do tariffs. Tariffs for the farmers, even at 10%, takes us out of the market. No, and obviously this creates concern. My colleagues have already spoken to this, especially Molly, where basically for Mexico, 80% of the market for agricultural product goes to the States. So this is extremely dangerous in this time of days when people can have gut feelings and all of a sudden put tariffs. I am relieved when the tariffs came, because when the tariffs came, I think that they recognized, the United States recognized that both Mexico and Canada were part of a team, part of a North American free trade agreement, so there was no tariffs. We realize we have challenges in Mexico in migration, in drug trafficking, organized crime, and we're working hard to fix it. And we're looking forward to work together with the United States and Canada as our partners to solve these issues, because nobody wants it and we're the first one that don't want it. Crime creates immigration, and immigration, it's involuntary. It's people that are happy living in Mexico. They love to be close to their families. So we have to solve these issues in the long term and structurally, so people stay in their countries where they will be happier. I would like to leave it, Henry, at this right now and get into more in-depth discussion. So thank you for the opportunity for this introduction.
Thank you so much, Jorge. I think we've covered a lot of ground with these initial interventions, and I want to focus on the great power competition aspect, which is great power competition really leaves no stone unturned, and geopolitical risk affects everyone. We heard earlier in this conference someone say from the government side that economic security is sort of taking a front seat now from pure sort of economic, competitiveness logic. So I'm wondering what, in your opinions, are the primary challenges rising geopolitical tensions pose for the North American agriculture industry, and what maybe is the different view from, say, Ottawa, DC, and CDMX. And so, Erin, if we want to start with you.
Sure. I think the primary challenges from our perspective would be that business thrives in an environment of predictability, and we are living in a very unpredictable environment. And so right now, Canadian farmers are thinking a lot about what crops to put in the ground. They think about a lot of things when they make that consideration, and one of them is access to markets, and that's becoming an increasingly difficult decision to make. So the level of unpredictability is certainly having an effect. The trade infrastructure, which we've referenced a little bit about, because no two countries are more highly integrated than Canada and the United States. And so our concern right now with respect to what's happening in the US and the impact that's going to have for Canada's agriculture sector is efficiency and cost, because that's built into the system right now. So how much less efficient are we going to be as a result of this? How much more expensive is it going to be to do trade between the two countries? We invest a lot of time and money, a lot of resources in developing relationships with these really important countries, and China is no exception. And so when we move away from these countries and these markets, when we lose access, what impact does that have on our market share? And when other countries and competitors move into that space, we've seen examples of this, it's very difficult for us to regain that market share in those key markets. So some very quick short-term decisions can have some very serious long-term ramifications. And then I think uniquely from a Canadian perspective, I would suggest that when we look at how heavily we are indexed in the American market relative to our competitors, this is something we've been thinking about for some time, but I think what's happening in the US in the last 70 days puts a finer point on the need for us to consider and expedite a level of market diversification. 60% of what we export goes into the US market. I mean, that's a clear vulnerability, and we need to start thinking a bit more about the importance of diversification.
Thank you. Molly?
I won't speak on behalf of our grower groups here in America, but I think there's a lot of commonalities of the uncertainty and market access that they would share with growers in Canada that Erin just spoke to. But I'll also note that the rising tensions and tariffs can also have an effect to the rules-based trading system that our countries really do rely on. Like I talked about the risk-based approach, regulatory approach that our countries really have worked so hard to put forward and preserve, and how our agriculture systems are rooted in is a risk-based approach. And so it's extremely important for our industry, for this rule-based trading system where they have things like the sanitary and phytosanitary agreement, which gets really wonky and in the weeds very quickly, not to put a pesticide pun in there, but preserving that is such a successful part of WTO for agriculture, and the concerns around eroding that strength that North America has together in those forums. So that is one area, just outside of Aaron's comments, that I wanted to strike on.
Excellent. Jorge, thoughts on geopolitical risk to...
Completely. I think my colleagues have touched on it perfect. So that's the bad thing of being the gentleman in the room, that they start to say everything you were going to say. But certainty is very important, no? Because certainty drives investment. So all of a sudden, we find our farmers, our industry, the private sector in general, scrambling in a new world economy. There has been significant changes, no? And I just want to touch on the challenge. It's not so easy. If you are we talk about, and that's the consequence of not having certainty, of not respecting the rules. When you have rules, when you have a free trade agreement, and all of a sudden they are unilaterally being basically not enforced anymore, not respected, it creates a significant problem. And I think it was a U.S. officer who said, when you do not pay attention to the rules of a trade document, of a trade agreement, it is not worth the paper it is written on. So that's the type of things we're facing. When you start reaching agreements and you do not respect them, not only do you lose certainty, which is very clear, but you lose trust. And that's why my colleagues are saying we need to diversify markets, because we cannot be solely dependent. Mexican and Canadian farmers are looking elsewhere because they cannot rely on just one client. And especially for Mexico, this is important. 80% of our agricultural products go to the United States. So we do have a challenge, and it has to also do with supply chain management. Because when you have a supply chain, when you have the railroad systems, when you have the trucks, the refrigeration, the installations to export to the United States, you cannot overnight change that and start creating the infrastructure and the boats and the refrigeration and the new clients. So it takes a while. So this can be a major disruption that I think is being understood and we're beginning to address. I think something that as a Mexicans, we have the challenge of diversifying our crops into more value added. We have to play to the vocation and the strengths of the products, of our climate, of the weather, and thus play to those strengths to have the most competitive products in the region, not only for North America, but for the world. And I think that we have to understand, again, and that this does not need to happen. There needs to be cooler heads to prevail. We make each other stronger, and we need to understand as a region, and every citizen in our country needs to understand how important it is and how important food security is. And by shaking up this supply chain, this agreement, we are putting this at risk. And I am sure that if we do not solve it, if cooler heads do not prevail, and we recognize this, our children will suffer from this, because there will be in the future some sort of lack of certain critical food supplies, like it could be rice, it could be corn, it could be wheat, but we could have a major failure in any of these, including soy that I did not mention. So we need to take it. It's a big responsibility. And together we need to create awareness, not only to the governments, but to every citizen. And we must all together fight to keep this very important balance and competition, because together we can make products competitively across the region, playing on the strengths of our land and our weather and our people.
Thank you. So we've talked a lot now also about certainty in the North American trading relationship. But there's another big economic relationship that's being restructured right now, and that is, of course, the relationship with China. In response to U.S. reciprocal tariff announcements on April 2nd, China has raised, by my last count, an 84% tariff on all U.S. imports. The U.S. has responded with, again, by my last count, I feel like I should have a news feed up here with me, but 145% tariffs on Chinese imports. This is poised to have a significant impact on the global on markets across the board, but especially agriculture as well. And I'm wondering, maybe beginning with you, back to you, Jorge. What is the role of the North American trading bloc in mitigating the shocks of an intensified U.S.-China trade war?
No, completely. I think every day we've been talking about nearshoring, friendshoring, and I think that holds true more than ever. I think this friendshoring, this nearshoring is very important. As Mexicans, the market is huge, but just so you get an idea, for every dollar that Mexico exports to China, they import into Mexico $11. So basically, there's a huge disbalance, and there's something very important. As we are complementary with the United States, we are not so with China. We have a manufacturing sector which is thriving, which is being competitive, which is making not only U.S. products competitive in the States, but also competitive across the world. And I would say basically helping the U.S. be competitive across the world, thus saving a lot of American jobs, creating and being supportive of a lot of American jobs. That needs to be understood. I think China is a formidable power. They have been investing significantly in technology, and we have seen them leapfrog many times. And I think that they have a very clear focus, a very long-term focus. Sometimes that is very hard to compete, and as a world, we need to figure out. They have something that I've heard recently a lot talked about, of growth choking technologies. They have a long-term roadmap that we sometimes in the Western world don't have. We look at quarterly results. I think the Chinese are working for 50 years. So that creates significant challenges. I think, unfortunately for Mexico, the challenges of being able to export more to them has to grow in Mexico. So you get an idea. 1 of every 3 new cars is Chinese. And if you look at the prices, they are probably basically 20 to 30% cheaper than US made equivalent cars. So obviously they have a lot of economies of scale that we must, as a region, be able to address to compete. I do not believe in tariffs. I believe that tariffs in the long term will make our industry, our agriculture sector, and the manufacturing sector weaker. We need to be able to compete upfront and directly without the need of tariffs, because tariffs at the end will make us less competitive. So we must, as a region and together, find a way to compete with a formidable competitor that is China. And we have it clear, Mexico has it clear, that our partners are Canada and the United States. And we have to work together on the challenges that come from China and from around the world.
Molly, over to you.
Yeah, so, we know retaliation targets agriculture, and unfortunately, that'll put a strain on a lot of our growers here in the United States, and why they might find other markets. There's not a good one-for-one, right, for the China markets for some of our key commodities. And so I think the hope is how can all of this bring together a stronger Canada and Mexico relationship, the three countries. Again, in the original reciprocal tariffs last week, they were noticeably missing, which was a good indicator that there's potential there to continue to work on those relationships. But how can we come together and maybe think about longer term decisions that can help support farmers, not just in America, but for all three countries? You know, I know other growers are being impacted too in China from other things. So just thinking about that region, like how as a region can we, I don't know that I have a good solution today. I'm just posing more questions more than anything. But yeah, it's that opportunity it creates for a longer term solution to this question.
Absolutely. Erin, any thoughts?
I don't know that Canadians breathed a tremendous sigh of relief on April 2nd. I think that there is very much, to give you a Canadian perspective, a sense of hypervigilance with respect to the situation in the US. We were the first and the second to be targeted by the American tariffs. And we continue to be targeted by tariffs because we face 25% tariffs on Canadian steel, aluminum, and cars. So yes, to a certain extent, we were exempt. We would like to consider that is perhaps some indication of this idea that we could look to restore diplomatic ties and work again more closely between the three governments. But as an industry, we have always been doing that, and we will continue to do that, and we are very much aligned in our work across North America and internationally. And look, this situation does not bode well for American farmers who've lost access to one of their most important markets. The last time this happened and there was a trade war between the US and China, the biggest beneficiary was Brazil, and they increased their market share in China significantly, and they've retained that market share. And so this has long-term implications for American farmers. You know, we're facing our own challenges in Canada. We face a 100% tariff currently right now on Canadian peas and canola going into China. And we have been and will continue to encourage the Canadian government following the April 28th election to use that opportunity with the election to restore diplomatic ties with China and begin to have a conversation once again about what it looks like to reopen that very important market for Canadian producers. And I expect that American producers are feeling similarly about their loss of that important market.
Absolutely. I'll remind folks to please submit your questions on the Ask Live Questions link on the event webpage. And I think for one final question from my end before we open it up for our audience Q&A portion of the event, I'm going to piggyback off of what Erin just said, because reshuffling trade ties also creates opportunities for competitors in the agriculture section to strengthen their position vis-a-vis North America. You rightly pointed out Brazil was the biggest winner of the previous US-China trade tensions, and there are other countries that are competitors with the North American agricultural market. How can the United States, Mexico, and Canada work to preserve the region's competitive edge in global markets as we're suffering from these kind of current upheavals? And maybe I'll begin with asking Molly that.
How can we work together to preserve our markets, right? That's the question. It's a great question. I think, market access is so important to all of our growers in each of these countries, right? And traditionally, when I think about some of the issues that impact our industry, again, I go back to more of the non-tariff trade barriers. So how can we, if only we could take tariffs out of the equation right now, and I know we can't do that, but, Brazil, while they are a big competitor, they're also a friend in the sense that they also support a risk-based regulatory approach globally, which allows access for our growers to maintain or enter new market access into new countries or into current countries. And so I think North America bloc continuing to work on those non-tariff trade barriers in line step. And then also, we do have to bring into the fold some of these, our competitors who are also like-minded in this sense. So it creates a little maybe frenemy might be a good word to use here on the issue, but I think those are really important if we can, and I know we can't right now, but if we can look past tariffs and think about market access, kind of beyond that, those non-tariff trade barriers and how we can work together is really, I think, critical as well.
Absolutely. Jorge, any thoughts from your end on this question of how we can preserve our markets and our competitive edge?
Sure. Obviously, the markets are there, no? So that's important. And we need to obviously keep the doors open, stay competitive. And to that, that's what I would like to talk to. We have country vocations of our land, of our weather. And I think talking about the Brazilians have done an excellent job in supporting their farmers by playing to their strengths. What they do good, they do very good. And they have the support of government research and development to help them have the best-in-class seeds specific to their region. And that permits them to be competitive. They also have scale. The products where they work, they have significant scale. And just so you get an idea, it is very common that a small farmer has 2,500 acres, more than 1,000 acres. You have farmers, and it's also not uncommon. Obviously, these are the best-in-class producers, but they have 2,500 hectares. So they can do this because they are producing competitively. They're working very close with government institutions to create the right genetics for the products that are unique to them and they can produce efficiently. And obviously, I think Mexico needs to do that. We need to have the best genetics to improve productivity for our weather condition, for our type of soil. So I would say we need to work on making, and this is part of a sustainability effort, is to get more production from each acre that we plant. And we can only do this with the best of genetics. And the genetics that have to also include, they have to be resistant to droughts, they have to be resistant to different other things, like it would be like pests, like all this type of resistant varieties that you have as climate is changing. I think the US does a good job, Canada also, but Mexico playing to the strengths which are different to the United States. We need the right genetics for our farmers. And today, I think there is a pushback that the government and certain people in society are looking at genetics as genetically improved materials as a bad word, when it is not. If we do not do it and we do not embrace these technologies, it will be very hard to compete across the world.
Thank you. And Erin, to close us out on this topic.
Well, I don't mean to be cheeky, but don't give your customers reason to shop elsewhere. Would be one place to start, I think, and I oversimplify it when I say that, but let's keep that top of mind. And I think if I have this opportunity for some closing comments, which relate in some way to your final question, I think, look, the more the U.S. exits these really important multilateral forums where we can continue to have these conversations, the more we create space for others to take up a leadership role in those forums. To your point, Molly, we are like-minded. Canada, the US, and Mexico, the industry is on so many fronts. It's important from a Canadian perspective for us to have our American partners and allies by our side in those multilateral forums. And so, China's foreign minister spoke out recently saying that China is a force for stability. China is a force for multilateralism. China is the protector of the global order. Now, regardless of whether or not you agree with those statements, the point is that's the statement they're making. And that's a very salient point right now when you consider all of the instability that we are facing. Does China become the more predictable, stable, reliable trading partner? I don't have an answer, but that's a question that I would ask. And I would close by saying, from a Canadian perspective, when Canada can trust that trade with its largest customer is stable, we can make more strategic decisions about how we approach trade with the rest of the world.
Excellent. I'm now going to open it up to our intern, Natalia Hidalgo, who has collected some audience questions to read them out.
Thank you. Can you hear me? This question relates to a point Ms. Erin touched on earlier about relationship building. A tit for that tariff on China sends the message that collaboration with China is out of the window. Despite this environment, are any potential avenues for collaboration rather than tension or confrontation between North American partners and China that could enhance competitiveness of North American agricultural sector?
Thank you. Erin, you want to take that first?
Okay, just to ensure that I'm hearing you correctly, was this just largely around more from a Canadian perspective in terms of how we enhance the relationship with China?
It's a Canadian, US, Mexican perspective. But
On
it's something
enhancing
that
the
you
relation?
Yes, but it's something that you mentioned earlier in the conversation.
Yeah, I think I'll speak from a Canadian perspective in terms of how we enhance the relationship with China. And look, we've got some work to do in Canada, as I mentioned earlier. As a result of political decisions that were taken, the agriculture sector, to your point, Molly, which is often the first impacted by some of these decisions in terms of the retaliatory response, is that we're facing a 100% tariff on canola and peas. And so it's not an easy situation to navigate, but we are encouraging our federal government to use the election at the end of this month as an opportunity to restore diplomatic relations with China, return to the negotiating table, if you will, and have a conversation specifically about how we can remedy that situation. That's what we're hoping for. It's a big market, it's an important market, and we have to work to restore those ties.
Molly or Jorge, do either of you have any thoughts on that question as well?
I can touch on it briefly, but I think we always have to have collaboration with China. No, the volatility of the weather affects us all. No, it makes food security for the planet a challenge. So we will all be affected. No, so we must align for food security of all human beings. No. Having said that, there is concern because we're living in a more polarized world, and I can remember from the times of George Bush, who said, or you're with me or you're against me. And I think, and I am concerned that as a Mexico and possibly Canada, we will be forced to make those type decisions. Or you're with the United States and we open our doors and our markets, or you're somewhere else. So we might face that decision. I don't think it's a correct decision because at the end, food security is a world problem, and we must work for all the citizens of the world, but we will be faced. So I am concerned of making these decisions because they will affect the world long term. But unfortunately, I think the world in the coming years will be more regional.
From the U.S. perspective, we're in a trade war with China. It's a continuing, evolving situation by the day. Like you said, let's put on some news and see where it is right now. I don't know if it's changed since we sat at this table, but I think looking forward in terms of North America, just looking at the USMCA renegotiations in 2026, that's going to be a vital piece of the puzzle here of how do we continue to maintain and enhance that relationship of the three countries, and how can that agreement be a space to do that in the areas where we have all this tariff. To Erin's earlier point, we do have tariffs on both countries that create uncertainty and instability. So how can that renegotiation process maybe build some more stability together, but also strengthen agriculture, strengthen manufacturing, things like that, just thinking outside of China and competing with China.
Thank you. And I would say that we have time for one final question from the audience. Natalia, if there's one.
China has been focused on reducing import reliance and improving domestic farmland through different policies, including expanding abroad and investing in and acquiring farmland, livestock operations, and agricultural equipment and intellectual property. How can North America react to this? And is North America reciprocating at the same pace and level?
If you want to, I can take that very fast. I think you really have to admire the Chinese in a regimen which they have capitalist and economic capitalist views. They also have the discipline, and they can get everybody aligned very fast. And I would just like to talk a couple of points on that. Number one, in the cotton business, which that we work as a company on, China was the biggest importer of cotton into China. In a matter of years, they became the biggest exporter. Also in hog production, which we know well, basically they were the biggest importer of hogs, mainly from the United States. And despite having a disease that decimated their herd, they came back stronger and basically are the biggest producers of hog products. So this is the type of ability and how fast they're able to react to adversity. So we must stand and take notice and learn, because they are very, very fast to react, and they change the dynamics of the markets very fast.
Thank you. Molly?
Yeah, so we pride ourselves as being representing innovators, right? Our members are looking at the next best thing for growers to protect their crops from threats. And we have to have, if we want to compete globally, whether that's China, Brazil, or other countries, we have to have a regulatory system that supports that innovation. And unfortunately, we've had a lot of delays in the registration process. And then we're also, thinking about what R&D is coming if there's significant impacts to companies via tariffs. Are they going to be investing in research and development here in America? So we have to address some of these key things so that we can continue to bring forward the latest and greatest to remain competitive against the Chinese market, against the Brazilian market, against even our friends in Canada and Mexico, because we do compete at the end of the day in certain spaces too. So what we've seen, though, unfortunately, is EPA is not resourced well enough on our particular registration issues. And that really does impact what our farmers have access to moving forward. And so that's a big priority for us, is making sure that our innovations can continue and be competitive.
To that, I would only add, Molly, that I hope that the U.S. will continue to work through the forums that we've established, both from a continental perspective but internationally, these multilateral forums where we have worked in lockstep as partners to continue to advance that innovation. Those forums exist already, and so we'd like to see some assurance that the American administration sees value in those forums and wants to continue to advance our collective interests through those forums as well, because we certainly see value in working with those like-minded partners, of which there may be fewer and fewer on some of these issues, to continue to work more closely through those forums.
Thanks so much. This has been an incredibly fruitful discussion, I think, about a very timely issue, an issue that's probably, even if the tariffs were to go away tomorrow, I think that the ramifications would be with us for a long time. So I want to thank all our panelists and ask that you all give them a big round of applause. Thanks so much.